Lester, Wushu engineer. We live on a small 40-acre property, a rural property just outside of the inland city of Toowoomba in Queensland, Australia. Our businesses, which include martial arts school, the Chinese Martial Arts and Health Centre Australia, the Wushu Workshop, and the Martial Arts Research and Testing Laboratory, or Martel, they're all physically based here on our property. We've slowly developed the property as a martial arts training facility with both traditional and modern high-tech training equipment, and have even helped to develop an informal Australian bush campsite on the top of our hill, which incidentally is situated right alongside the significant bush trail known as the Bicentennial National Trail, which is Australia's premier long-distance, multi-use recreational trekking route, stretching 5,330 kilometers from Cooktown in far north Queensland to Healesville in Victoria. So a few months ago, before the current pandemic really hit, I was fast asleep in my bed. It was about maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Yeah, I know. I go to sleep early and I get up early. Anyway, as you can no doubt gather from much of my content on YouTube, I take self-defense very seriously. I'm a self-defense instructor. I've spent most of my life living in South Africa prior to moving here to Australia, and I've had to interact with various dangerous situations in order to protect myself over the years. My personal instructor trained some of the old South African military personnel in hand-to-hand close combat and combat handgun shooting during the Angolan Bush War of the 1980s. As such, although I'm not a paranoid person, I do always practice the basic principles of self-defense, most important of which involve vigilance and awareness. I subconsciously monitor all movements in and around my property, even while I'm asleep. We have a dog, but I find that I'm typically aware of something happening on the property before he becomes aware of it. That's not to say that Mungo is a bad dog by any means. He's a good dog, although he still exhibits some of the side effects of the abuse that he suffered at the hands of his previous owners. He's a rescue dog. Well, as I was saying, I was asleep at about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and I was awakened by the sound of some vehicles slowing down on the road outside of my property, one of which sounded a bit like a minibus. I know the sound of a vehicle slowing down in order to enter my property, and that's what woke me up. So I woke up and I had a look out of my bedroom glass sliding door, which by design faces the driveway, giving me a largely unobstructed view of anyone entering my property. I could tell from the lights on the road that there were two vehicles parked on the side of the road just outside of my driveway. Some adult males got out of the vehicles and they began a conversation, which I could not make out any particulars of because it was just too far away. Well, aside from the fact that it was pretty suspicious given the hour and the location, I was also pretty peeved for being woken up. I reached for my Ace Beam W10 flashlight, which I keep alongside my bed, along with other surprise gift packages for unwelcome visitors. I'm not going to get into details on this torch right now because I'll go into more detail later on in the video. Suffice to say that it represents a new type of technology in terms of LED torches. It's often referred to as a white laser torch or an LEP, or laser emission phosphor torch. It produces an incredibly bright but very concentrated and collimated beam of light that has a 1,000 meter range. And when they say 1,000 meters for the ace beam, they mean 1,000 meters. I turned on my torch, I stood in my bedroom, and I directed it through my glass sliding door towards where the cars were parked on the side of the road, about 70 meters away from me. At this range, the beam from the ace beam was incredibly bright and very concentrated. This is one of the disadvantages of an LEP or white laser torch. It's typically too concentrated and collimated to provide much useful background illumination. So not particularly useful as a short range utility torch or utility light. However, in this situation, it was absolutely perfect. I played it over the spot a few times as if it was a spotlight being directed at the unwelcome visitors. I fully expected to have to go and investigate in person, but I thought that I would announce that an investigation was in process of being launched prior to putting my boots on. Well, the reaction was almost instantaneous. The people on the road jumped into their vehicles and drove off at speed. This was a very suspicious reaction in its own right to my probing torch beam. If there had been a legitimate problem, such as vehicular trouble, they would have welcomed the attention and the potential help that I could offer them. Well, I thought it was an excellent outcome. I didn't have to engage directly, and I was able to make them go away, all from the comfort of my bedroom without even putting my boots on. As Matt Easton from Scholar Gladiatora mentioned in one of his recent videos, the purpose of warfare has not necessarily been to kill the enemy, but instead it was often just to make them go away. And I suggest that if you are not subscribed to Matt Easton, that you do go and sub to his channel. He's very knowledgeable on his subject, typically dealing with HEMA and medieval weapons and tactics and so on. Very, very good channel to look at. Well, anyway, in terms of the purpose of warfare being to make the enemy go away, often, this is triply applicable for self-defense. The purpose of self-defense is to establish safety using whatever means necessary, which more often than not involves avoidance behavior. So I got to use my ace beam as a self-defense tool in a pretty unorthodox and unexpected scenario. I certainly didn't expect it. It was only some time later that I started putting two and two together as to why my late night visitors may have left in such a hurry. The less savory elements in Australian society are very familiar with the fact that rural landowners and farmers are legally armed in order to control feral animal populations in many cases. In fact, many criminals raid farms specifically in order to steal firearms that they can then use in perpetrating one form of crime or another. When my visitors decided to start up their no doubt illicit deal on the road, more than likely involving banned substances, it was in the knowledge that the denizens of my road may very well be armed. They were also no doubt aware that powerful flashlights are often attached to boomsticks.
See this? This is my boomstick!
So I believe in retrospect that they may have believed that behind the beam of the light was a torch, and the torch was connected to a boomstick, and the boomstick was connected to an Elmer Fudd.
Shh. Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting rabbits.
Which encouraged them to be elsewhere very quickly in case Elmer Fudd got too interested in their illicit dark country road deal. A little while ago, I released a video entitled Torches and Flashlights for Self-Defense, Weapons of Distraction, in which I tested the use of a torch as a self-defense tool under controlled conditions. I encourage you to see that video before you watch the rest of this one, so that you get more of a comprehensive idea of the testing procedure that I used, because I'm not going to go into as much detail in this video. To sum it up, I performed several tests to determine what effect, if any, a torch would have on the wushu scientist's performance as she tried to punch me in a particular location, which was an electronically monitored pad mounted on my chest, while I tried to outmaneuver her attacks or without deflecting them in any way. In short, the torch had a very significant effect on the wushu scientist's performance, reducing her performance by 55% in the case of a continuous torch beam and 66% in the case of a strobing torch beam. However, all of these tests were performed under daylight conditions. I stated in that video that I believed that the effects of using the torch under darkened conditions would more than likely be more significant in terms of its effect on an attacker. Now, one of my viewers who commented on that video suggested that under darkened conditions, I would also be negatively affected. This was a fair observation to make. Another viewer also made a request for me to perform the test in darkened conditions, so I decided to repeat the test in darkened conditions. We repeated the test using the same setup and the same torch and performed one test using the strobe function in darkened conditions. And of course, as I mentioned in my previous video, these tests were all performed with my old survival laser torch. Now, note that the room that we performed the test in, we performed the test at night, but the room that we were in was not completely dark. Because the more likely scenario for the torch's use would be in a darkened urban street environment, where there will be some incident light. In addition, a completely dark environment would have been very difficult for us to film effectively. So we simulated the kind of light levels that I would expect to find in a very dark street in our school building. And this is what the test and subsequent interview looked like. All right.
Well, that was fighting blind.
You got one.
I got one.
Well, I think that pretty much proves that it's more effective
In the
in
dark.
darkened conditions. Okay, so we've redone that experiment in the dark. What were
Yeah.
your thoughts?
I was completely blind. I just had to try and feel. I couldn't see you except a couple of times where the torch was angled away from me. And as soon as you shone it in my face, I could see nothing.
I could tell you were trying to fight
I
with
think
me.
I punched you in the wrong place as well.
I could tell that you were trying to feel where the target was.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I think that pretty much proves that it's actually more effective when it's in darkened conditions.
Yeah.
But so you got one punch in, and I
It
think
was just so lucky.
from memory, using the strobe in light conditions I think you got 3.
Let's see here.
The wushu scientist managed to achieve only 1 effective strike in the minute-long test. That represented an 88% reduction in her effectiveness. This is very significant. You'll notice from the footage of the test that there were times when it was clear that she actually could not tell where I was, a fact which I intuitively exploited to her detriment during the test as well. In terms of my own performance, my viewer was correct in that my movement was no doubt negatively affected by the darkness as well. However, the reduction in my effectiveness was trivial compared to the impact that it had on my opponent's effectiveness. The reduction in my effectiveness could also be offset to some extent by my use of incident light from the torch, directed and reflected off various surfaces, including my opponent, as I moved. I could do this because I was in control of the light, where the light was angled, and I could momentarily shine it in the direction I was going in to ensure that the path was clear before shining it back in the wushu engineer's face. The momentary removal of the torch from the wushu scientist's face did not allow sufficient time for her to recover from the disorienting night blindness that she was suffering from. As you no doubt know, moving from a light condition into a darkened condition, your eyes take time to adjust to the change. And the same is true when using a torch in self-defense. Your opponent does not instantly recover from having the torch shone in their eyes. As far as non-weaponized self-protection and self-defense tools that can be used for direct intervention go, a self-defense torch is an absolute essential in a country such as Australia, where carrying weapons for self-defense is not legal. As I mentioned in my previous video, you could use torches to strike opponents with, but you could do the same with a stick, a bottle, a rock, or a shoe for that matter.
Who throws a shoe? Honestly.
Having knurled grips and crenellations does not make a torch into a weapon. However, their use as a distraction can clearly give the wielder a massive tactical and psychological advantage when navigating a self-defense situation, as our tests suggest. And of course, torches can be used to navigate more mundane emergencies as well, such as power outages and poorly lit streets. However, your mobile phone torch is just not going to cut it if you want all of this functionality. I would recommend the purchase of a high-quality LED torch with the kind of tactical functionality that we tested in these videos. However, buyer beware. Don't be fooled by the kind of adverts that pop up on various websites. 100 million lumens?
Tell him he's dreaming.
Yeah.
I think not, mate. Beware of these big numbers. They are complete fabrications. Not all torches are created equal. And if you want to invest in a torch that is going to be effective and give you the functionality that you need in a self-defense torch, you need to be prepared to pay a bit more than your bargain basement inflated claims dodgy dealer is asking for. We have been looking for a good torch supplier for some time in order to stock a torch product on our Wushu Workshop website. This has cost us a bit in terms of time and money as we bought and tested many torches that did not perform to our requirements. However, recently we found what we were looking for in Olight. The product that we bought and reviewed is their Olight M2R Pro Warrior Tactical Flashlight. And this is it. Comes in a nice little carry case. Very compact. Actually got some heft to it. Quality. It's a good quality item. It's about the closest thing that I've found to a purpose-made self-defense torch on the market today. It's powered by a high voltage, a 5000 milliampere hour 21700 lithium ion battery, and has a maximum output of 1,800 lumens. That's crazy. The torch that I used in the self-defense tests was my old survival laser torch, which had a maximum output back in the good old days of only 1,000 lumens maximum. The Olight flashlight is stated as having a range of 300 meters, and I have no reason to doubt that this is the case. However, at that kind of range, the light would obviously be quite diffuse. It has a magnetic tail charging port that you can plug into a USB and connect via the magnetic charging cable, which is a nice touch. It does come with a crenellated bezel, as you can see, very small crenellations really, so nothing too aggressive. But as I've already stated, that does not necessarily make it an effective weapon. Its main purpose should always be seen as a tactical and strategic tool that provides you with distraction-based advantages that can improve your other self-defense interactions. Now, the main advantages that I see in this torch are its brightness, its versatility, and its activation. It can be activated from a rear push-button switch built into the charging cap, which defaults to switching it on at maximum brightness. That's a nice touch. The other less bright continuous modes can also be activated from the back push button, depending on how many times you press it in quick succession. The torch is also fitted with a side switch, which you might be able to just about see there, which can access all of the modes of the torch depending on the number of times that you press it. You can cycle slowly through the different modes, which has a number of different brightness. It has a number of different brightness levels, and it also has a strobe function. However, and this is a really nice touch, if I panic press this button a lot of times, it actually goes straight to the strobe function, which is a very nice touch, because as those of you who are familiar with self-defense situations already know, under high panicky, high stress, adrenaline-rich interactions, panic can set in, which we try to offset with training, but it does sometimes happen, and panicked multi-presses will get you straight to the strobe function, which is really what you want to be at in a self-defense situation. Pressing it twice gets you straight to the bright function, which is also quite nice. So with a little bit of training, obviously you do require training in order to get those instinctive behavior patterns into your brain. So I absolutely 100% suggest that if you do get this for self-defense, that you do incorporate it into some training protocol. Now, these are really good operational features that would facilitate this torch's use in a self-defense situation, obviously, as I said, with a little bit of training. Now, I'm not a torch review channel. There are a lot of those on YouTube that specialize in reviewing various torches. You can refer to those videos and those channels to get the full specs on this product and other products. I don't want to go into all of the details here on my channel. I want to focus instead on its applicability in a self-defense situation and a brief test of its brightness at various ranges compared to other torches. I tested this torch's brightness using the Lux Light Meter free Android app available from Doggo Apps at two different ranges, 3 meters and 9 meters, in order to get an idea of how the brightness decreased with distance. I compared its performance against that of my old survival laser torch, the one that I used in the tests, and my Ace-Beam W10 flashlight. A technology, now as I mentioned about the Ace-Beam earlier, it represents a different kind of technology in terms of LED flashlights. A technology which actually hasn't really caught on, even though it's been around for a few years now. I think the problem is that many people do not see its relevance, and it's a lot more expensive. So the price tag on mine, for instance, was over 300 Australian dollars. As you can see, it's got a very aggressive crenellated bevel, but fortunately that's removable, so you don't necessarily have to have that on the torch. The technology in this torch basically involves illuminating a phosphor target with the light from a blue laser. The phosphor reacts to the blue laser by emitting intense white light, which is then semi-collimated by a lens before leaving the flashlight. Similar technology can be seen in the headlights of some of the modern luxury cars. The light is very intense and very concentrated with very little diffusion and scattering over distance, allowing it to achieve its extreme throw ranges. As I've mentioned previously, mine has a maximum range of 1,000 meters, which is actually quite incredible for a torch of that size. It does not allow for a strobe function, unfortunately, which in my opinion and based on the tests that we performed is pretty much a must-have when it comes to tactical self-defense torches. Another con associated with the ace beam is that the light is actually too concentrated and too intense. Keeping the beam concentrated on an attacker's face requires some skill because the light distribution is not wide enough at typical ranges. In addition, the light is so intense that if your attacker or attackers were not to look away rapidly from the light beam and keep their gaze averted from the light, they could potentially suffer permanent damage to their eyes, much like you would expect from looking into an arc welder's arc light. We wouldn't want to permanently hurt Mr. Criminal's eyes because we care for the health and safety of our attackers here in Australia. And so for these reasons, I would not necessarily recommend this torch as a self-defense tool for inexperienced self-defense practitioners or for general carry. However, I decided to showcase its performance as a counterpoint to the O-light. And this is what the tests looked like. Alright, so background about 240. Bearing about 240 lux. Okay. Alright, so that's 8,500 at 3 meters. That's with the O light. 8,500 lux. So now I'm going to go to 9 meters.
1050.
1050. 1050 lux. Okay, so that was the O light. We'll go to the survival laser. Okay, so at 3 meters, it's about 720 lux. So now go to 9 meters. $297. Okay. 297 lux. And that was the survival laser. As you can tell, technology has certainly come a long way. Grab the next torch. So now we'll look at the ace beam. Ace beam at 3 meters.
Brightness is a bit lower. So
Yeah, 180. Okay. Alright, so about 33,000 lux at 3 meters, and at 9 meters
about
4,600.
Yeah.
4,600 lux. Okay, so clearly we have a winner, but as I mentioned in my in the rest of my video. The applications of the ace beam are limited tactically because of the fact that certain tactical features like the strobe are not available in this model, and also, as you can tell from the demonstration that we've seen here, the spot is actually quite small, doesn't actually spread that much. So yeah, harder to keep on target in a high stress situation. So the results were actually quite compelling, as mentioned during the tests, and taking into account the background light levels, which during the first two tests involving the O-light and the survival laser were 240 lux, and during the ace beam test were dropped to 180 lux because of a passing cloud. At 3 meters, the O-light achieved 8,000. Modified based on the background lux levels, it achieved 8,260 lux. At 9 meters, it achieved 810 lux. The survival laser torch achieved 480 lux at 3 meters and 57 lux at 9 meters. And the ace beam achieved 32,820 lux at 3 meters and 4,420 lux at 9 meters. And at this stage, I'd like to remind you that all of the tests that we performed that demonstrated the effectiveness of a torch used in self-defense were performed with the survival laser torch, which was between 70 and 94% dimmer than the O-light. We also performed a side-by-side comparison of the beam diameters of the ace beam and the O-light, and this is what at 3 meters, and this is what it looked like. Okay, just to demonstrate what the size of the spot is like as a comparison between the ace beam and the O-light, I'm going to shine them side by side, and the Wushu scientist is just going to circle them so that we get an idea. You'll be able to see really quite clearly from the video what size spot we're talking about, which of course is quite important if you need to keep that spot on a particular target. So let's just have a look. So this is the ace beam, and this is the O-light. Okay, so very clearly you can see there the sheer scale of difference between what the O-light can do and what the ace beam can do in terms of keeping a tight, the ace beam's beam is quite tight, so very difficult to keep that on a particular target, whereas the O-light allows for a great margin of error. So yeah, tactically a better choice for people who are not as experienced in terms of self-defense. In summation, I've had the O-light torch now for quite a few weeks. I've run my own tests on it, and I am reasonably satisfied that it is a very high quality, good value for money product, and would be my recommendation for anyone who wanted to purchase a torch for self-defense carry, which was also versatile enough to function as a standard utility light. As such, I'm satisfied enough with its performance to include it for sale on our Wushu Workshop website. So check out the link in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time. Cheers.